What's going on? This is the Saturday Down South podcast. I am Connor O'Gara. Will, the playoff is back, better than ever. That's what some are saying. We're going to preview Texas, Arizona State. You're going to be there, by the way, for the Peach Bowl on Wednesday. That's going to be awesome. Only slightly jealous that you will be there instead of me, but excited for you because have you been to a playoff game before? Is this going to be your first?
A playoff game. I went to, I've been to the SEC championship game, and I went to LSU's Natty, but I actually have never been to a playoff game.
Well, LSU's Natty counts as playoff game. That counts. Okay, so you've already that you've already experienced all that and whatnot. So that's still going to be an awesome experience for you, and I'm very much looking forward to. I can't call it this weekend, but this week of football that we have, because also the 8:45 game that night, Georgia and Notre Dame. We're going to preview that, of course. And then we've got 5 SEC Bowls to recap. A little bit of a lad of the week that's going to, I'll just say it now, it's Jimmy Carter.
Yeah.
You already know it's Jimmy Carter. We'll get to some Jimmy Carter thoughts later on as well to close. And we're doing this while Mizzou and Iowa is happening, by the way. So Mizzou fans, if you're wondering why we're not talking about Mizzou, even though you're listening to this after the bowl game, it's not because we hate your team. It's because this is literally happening right just now. In fact, let's update the people. Let's look at a score that will be old by the time people listen. Okay, Mizzou is driving in the red zone. Iowa's up 14-7. Stay tuned for updates.
Stay tuned. And you're going to feel like a Nostradamus listener. You're going to be like, wow, I know what happened there. You know what's funny? I initially thought this podcast was during the LSU game because I got the days confused. And I was like, I don't know what you think I'm going to be doing this podcast. But yeah, it's bowl season's fun. And like I said, dude, I've been so much more locked in the bowl season. I fulfilled my promise there. There have been goofy games. There have been fun games. There have been stupid games. But yeah, it's been really entertaining. And the playoff games, honestly, so far have been kind of the least entertaining ones.
Exactly. I think that'll change. I'm hopeful that we won't get 4 blowouts in the quarterfinals. And I'll just say this now so we don't have to get it, we don't have to let results dictate how we feel about certain things like people did with the first round when they just talked about their specific narratives. But even if Boise State and Arizona State end up putting up really good fights, which I do think is possible, we'll get to my prediction for Texas, Arizona State here. But even if those two teams end up putting up really good fights, I would still rather see the actual seeding and not the highest ranked conference champs getting the 4 top seeds. Because, gosh, even when you just look at it and look at the possibilities, you very quickly realize that we probably could have done this a little bit differently. Brett McMurphy reported that there are already discussions about potentially making that change to the seeding. It'll take all parties involved to sign off on that. I don't know that all parties involved will sign off on it.
What did I say? This is just like being the commissioner of a fantasy football league. You change one thing, and then everybody comes to your door. Well, you changed this for him. Now you got to change this for me.
Yeah, exactly. And look, if you're wondering, like, all right, how much better would that have actually been? Here's what this first round would have been. I saw Adam Luckett tweet this out. Shout out my guy at KSR. But the teams that would have had the buys, if we had just done normal seeding, you could still have the highest ranked conference champs, the 5 highest ranked conference champs get an automatic spot in the college football playoff, but then just see them based on resume. It would have looked like this. The 4 teams with buys: Oregon at the 1 seed, Georgia at the 2, Texas at the 3, Penn State at the 4. And then your 12-5 matchup in the first round would have been Clemson at Notre Dame. You would have had Arizona State at Ohio State. You would have had SMU at Tennessee. Tennessee fans, you would have gotten your home playoff game. And then here's the kicker: Boise State at number 8 Indiana. We would have had IU hosting a college football playoff game.
This just seems significantly better across the board. Actually, you know what? They might be right about this one.
Yeah, I wouldn't hate that change. It's just going to be a matter of, and I don't think the advertising partners or anything like that, like ESPN, would nix that change. I think it's more so, how does the Big 12 feel? How does the ACC feel about that? Because it's very obvious that we shouldn't have Arizona State and Boise State both getting first round buys. And I say that with a lot of great respect for them. I picked Boise State to beat Penn State. Don't feel as good about that. And I think Arizona State's a really good football team. Let's talk about them.
Yeah.
Let's talk about this matchup.
And I will say too, really quick on that note, I feel like once again, Boise State has been, volunteered to tribute to, advocate for themselves, because they really got what they asked for 20 years one time, and it's this year. And of course, how people have reacted to this stuff. We're already looking at the change in the format because the first round games, people are saying teams didn't belong. So Boise State comes in there and has like a Fiesta Bowl redo from like '07. Maybe people will start going, hold on. It's so funny. They just end up in these situations over and over and over again, where it's like, well, now you got to play, TCU for the right to be in the dance later on. So, I mean, credit to them. They've made the best of their luck when they've had it.
It would lose a little bit of weight to my argument if Boise State went out and beat Penn State. It'd be a little bit tougher to come out and make that argument.
Smack James Franklin. That would be the funniest, most honestly logical outcome. And then like the proposal's already on ESPN's desk to go change it, get them out of there. And they're like, oh.
I know I've talked a lot about people pushing narratives too much. I would have a really tough time biting my tongue with James Franklin if that happened. And if he fell to 3-20 against AP top 10 teams with a loss to a Boise State team that's a double-digit underdog. And I probably, if I had to guess, I would say Penn State beating Boise State is the safest bet of the weekend. And maybe you could make a case Texas beating Arizona State is the safer bet, but I feel like I'm seeing nobody picking Boise State to beat Penn State. Actually, I'm not seeing anybody to pick Arizona State to beat Texas either. So one of those two, but still, that'd be a really tough look.
And now we've previewed. We're going to preview the 3 games you guys are going to enjoy watching. There you go. That's what we need to do.
Not going to do an in-depth breakdown of Ohio State, Oregon.
Right.
Everybody else and their mother is. I do have a lot of thoughts on that that we could get into. I'm sure we'll recap some of the stuff with that as well, and that's another reason for the reseeding thing that I feel would be justified of not necessarily defaulting to 4 highest ranked conference champs getting the automatic buys, but realizing Oregon in this path probably shouldn't have to face Ohio State with this first round game, and how unfortunate that is. But yeah, nonetheless, Oregon has a difficult matchup. I picked Ohio State to win that before the Tennessee game. Now I feel a lot better about that pick, but watch Oregon just come out and just drop the hammer on them.
Well, huge brain play by Day and Chip Kelly to lose to Michigan, so they didn't have to see Oregon a third time. They kept all the good plays close to the vest. They used some of them against Tennessee. Now they got a chance to beat Oregon.
Would they have? It would have changed the seeding probably to have the loss in the Big Ten championship.
Because they have been trying to keep teams apart. To our point about Texas and Georgia as well.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's talk about Texas. Number 5 seed Texas, 12.5-point favorites against number 4 seed Arizona State. The over-under, that just tells you how messed up that is right there. The seeding. The over-under I have is 1.5 references to Sam Leavitt saying that he's going to prove that he's a better quarterback than Quinn Ewers. How about that? New friend of the program, Quinn Ewers. If you miss what the Arizona State quarterback said, here was the quote from Blake Neiman that made the rounds. And by made the rounds, I mean on like every Texas message board in existence. The quote was, "I've watched him for a fair amount of time now." That's Leavitt talking about Quinn Ewers. "I'm just excited for the opportunity. People keep counting me out since day one, and I'm going to go prove why I'm the better quarterback."
Did you hear Quinn Ewers' response to that, by the way?
He played it off pretty well.
There have been all these rumors about Ewers. I hope he stays in the South. He fits in really well because they had a great season. It's some real bless your heart level stuff right there. I love the response of, they had a great season.
Quinn has learned over the years to choose his words very carefully. And that I thought was a good example of that. And Sam Leavitt, I don't think chose his words carefully in this instance. And I love the confidence of a quarterback. You got to have a confident quarterback, okay? He's been awesome for Arizona State. He's 11-1 as the starter, as Kenny Dillingham likes to remind us. He's a big reason why people aren't necessarily talking about Arizona State's offense in the same way that we're talking about Boise State's offense, because Leavitt is probably a better complement for Cam Scatterbo than Maddox Madsen. Yeah, that's right. Boise State quarterback Maddox Madsen, a name that just sounds like it's in College Football 25, sounds very made up. He is not quite as good of a complement for Ashton Genzy. So in the last 6 games, Leavitt averaged 10 yards per pass. Arizona State had 17 touchdown passes in that stretch. It's good. He's a really solid player. He's going to be one of the 5 or 10 best returning quarterbacks in the country. I feel pretty confident in saying that about the redshirt freshman, okay? Remember, if he's not really good, Jaden Rashada is still there. So make of that what you will. Obviously, he impressed enough people, and he has taken advantage of the opportunity that he's been given so far. He feels good about himself. But that's some bulletin board material for Texas that I'm not sure Texas needed, okay? Texas might have had a rough day at the office against Cade Klubnik in the first round. I think it's fair to say that by Texas's high standard, they would count that as a rough day at the office. It is still as good of a pass defense as any and all of college football. Also, the thing to remember, I don't know that we're going to get this total indication that one quarterback is definitively better than the other, because I think Leavitt's challenge is far greater than the challenge that Ewers is facing.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not the poking the bear type of move that I'd like to see. This Arizona State team, though, like, they've been playing kind of like this all year. They're playing like a team with nothing to lose. I love that they embrace Kenny Dillingham's confidence, and a comment like that certainly reflects it. I also wonder if Sam Leavitt is trying to do the thing where he takes the attention off Cam Scadaboo, make Texas focus on shutting him down instead of the guy who, in my opinion, should have been in New York. Yeah, maybe not. Scadaboo is actually ASU's leading receiver now that Jordan Tyson is out. That's probably another reason why the task that Leavitt is facing is super daunting. Call me crazy. I think Texas is going to trust its corners to be able to win in single coverage and get as many guys as possible around Cam Scadaboo. That seems like a lock. I don't know that that's going to work, but you need to, because Cam Scadaboo had 1,085 rushing yards after first contact. Forced 92 missed tackles.
Are people mutating, or is tackling getting worse? Because I feel like there's an even more ridiculous Genty stats. Like, you got these couple of guys, Dylan Sampson's also in there, where it's like, this guy's untacklable. Like, literally statistically untacklable.
Genty had well over 100 forced missed tackles this year, and that's according to PFF. I don't want to do the thing where I talk about Mountain West defenses compared to others. It's not like
we'll see. Like, that's the best part.
Yeah.
We're about to learn.
Yeah, I mean, and we have learned to a certain extent, because obviously Genty had the success he had against Oregon. So not to go down that road again, but you're right. I mean, there does seem to be more of these missed tackles, but I wanted to look up Dylan Sampson's end of year number for that, and he had 70 forced missed tackles. So make of that what you will. Scadaboo's a monster. Like, he's unbelievably good. Texas's top defensive priority is containing him. It's making sure that he's not dragging 5 defenders across the line of gain. And your job as Texas's defense is just preventing him from getting those chunk plays, which he has obviously done no shortage of times this year. The good news for Texas: Florida's the only team to average 4 yards per carry against this defense in a 14-game season. Collins, Broughton, those two guys have been phenomenal on the interior of that defensive line. We had all these questions coming into the year. How are they going to look without Sweat? How are they going to look without Murphy? Bo Davis is off to LSU. What's this defensive line going to look like? It's been a strength. It has been a lights-out unit. And, I think that to sit here and go, well, they're 11th in the country in yards per rush allowed, rushing yards per game allowed, that's a testament to PK and scheme and all these different things that they have working in their favor. And it definitely is. Anthony Hill Jr., a big part of that as well, all the different things he can cover up for a defense. But I do think that this is not a perfect unit. It's not. If it were a perfect unit, it would have had answers for Trevor Etienne in the second half of that SEC championship, or Trevor Etienne in the entire first game that Georgia and Texas played. At the same time, it's also a Texas defense that allowed just 4 runs of 20 yards in 14 games. That's tied for Ole Miss for best in FBS. Strength on strength matchup. That's what Cam Scadaboo against the Texas run defense is. And clearly, any world in which Arizona State is looking up, advancing to the Final Four, is going to be because Cam Scadaboo went off. Okay? Probably also involves ASU getting some key turnovers of Ewers. Anybody that's lined up across from Texas this year, unless they were facing Arch Manning, they probably said that'd be a really nice thing to have working in our favor. I think Ewers is going to be asked to do more in this matchup than he was against Clemson. ASU is better against the run than Clemson was. That's not saying a whole lot, but That's the area that I think Sark would like to be able to win, is trusting those receivers on the outside. You're getting Isaiah Bond back. How healthy does he look after he was out for the Clemson game? He got rolled up on in that SEC championship. But I think it's going to be big to have him back. As much as you and I have both become, I think it's fair to say we've both become big Matthew Golden fans, respect his game a lot. I watched that Clemson game and I thought to myself, he had the one nice long pass play where Ewers fits it into that tight window on a ball that just gets there between the two converging Clemson defenders. But outside of that, he was really quiet. And I think he kind of needs that compliment. And even though I'm not as high on Isaiah Bond as a lot of people are, when I see him in these mock drafts in the first round, I'm like, guys, I don't think he's that dude. I think he's a number 2 in the NFL.
Isaiah Bond from Texas? They got him going in the first round?
Yeah.
Not like some dude named, he's not Texas Tech or A&M. This is Isaiah Bond from Texas. They got the first round?
Nope, the one and only Isaiah Bond from Texas. Yeah.
Maybe he's like a third down specialist. Like the way they got pass rushers. Maybe they just take Isaiah Bond, like, do what you did with Milroe.
He's a good player. I mean, how much is Gravedigger impacting some of that, though?
That's what I'm saying. On key moments, this guy's one of the best players I've seen. But outside of those key moments, yeah.
Yeah, and that's why you like him in this game. And we've talked about Texas's unwillingness to want to attack downfield. They've kind of played to maybe some of the health stuff that Ewers has been working through. A lot of passes, behind the line of scrimmage or within 9 yards. Bond is the leader on that team in average depth of target, 13.9 average depth of target for him. So, you need big time plays, I think, from the passing game still. You'd like to be able to hit on some of those chunk plays. But I think that it's going to be really beneficial for Ewers to have close to a full arsenal against an Arizona State pass defense that's bottom half in the country against the pass, but has been much better down the stretch. Only 5 passing touchdowns allowed in the last 8 games, ranked 5th in FBS in 30-yard passes allowed. So they've been better probably than what the raw numbers indicate. I can't wait to see how Sark plays this. I've spoken ad nauseum about my respect for him as an offensive mind, especially with extra time to be able to prep, because I think if you're Sark, you're looking at it like this. On one hand, you've got a ground attack with Wisner and Blue that just got every blade of grass that they wanted in that football game against Clemson. Looked as good as it's looked all year, really rounding into form. On the other hand, you might be kind of banged up on the offensive line. Even if Majors and Cam Williams, the right tackle, even if both of those guys are a go, or if Goosby is able to step in at right tackle like he did in the second half of that game against Clemson, even if those things are kind of not as good as they were in the regular season, what do? That could indicate the type of offense that you want to run. That's kind of a boring thing to say, but it could indicate where you feel like you can actually take advantage of this Arizona State defense. So what plays out? I'm a little surprised Texas is double-digit favorite still, because they just haven't been that team that's going to beat you 35-7. And and I know the Michigan game was really impressive, how much that felt like a statement, but they haven't had a lot of games like that since then. Even against some of the lesser competition. I don't think Scadaboo is just totally stymied. He gets 150 on the ground. It's not going to surprise me. That would be a bad day at the office for him. I think that this ends up being a 60-minute game. I do. I don't think Wisner and Blue go off like they did against Clemson. But the question is, do we think Arizona State is about to knock off Texas and play in a semifinal? I can't get there. Maybe that's too much logo bias, but I've tried to look at this in a variety of different ways, because I do think Arizona State's being slept on a little bit. So I'll pick them to cover a double-digit spread. But I'm going to go Texas to win 28-24. Longhorns hang on with a pick of Levitt on a potential last-minute drive, with Arizona State trying to fight back and get a go-ahead touchdown.
I think it's a really good point about, they haven't been that team. And it's funny because in these big moments, against Alabama last year, against Michigan this year, when, quote unquote, the nation was tuning in, they had a couple of those games. And so I'm sure a lot of people would think that. And I think that, to your point, that's why the line comes in kind of in the middle, where it's like, there's this reality where they have been kind of this number one, 1 through 5 team all year that has all this talent. They got Arch Manning, they got Quinn Ewers, and I say them in that order because everybody knows Arch Manning. Like there's the press clippings version of Texas. I will say this. I think that these games, they've both been against Georgia, that are inexplicably close like that, and they ended up losing. And I think you got to kind of control for that. I think we're kind of creating a chain of screaming here where like Georgia can't beat Alabama, but Texas can't beat Georgia. So therefore Georgia is just fine, And so point being, we talked about talent, health, location. I say this every time, all right? Because I was so wrong about Ohio State. They had all of those things against Tennessee, and I just put my glasses on. So I've now given myself this rule. I think that for the location, right? Texas has just been there, right? This is kind of a newer environment for Arizona State. I think for talent, Texas solid advantage there. I think that when it comes to health, you could certainly make the case that Texas, that's where Arizona State has more of an advantage in Texas. Although, to your point, their leading receiver is now the running back.
Yeah.
Pretty big loss there, right? And the thing about Quinn Ewers is, say what you will about his gift, arm punts, but they've been consistent all year. It's not like he's now getting more hurt. It's not like he's probably, playing with something, as it often is in football. I mean, Joe Burrow, after the championship game, said he like cracked a rib on like an all-out blitz out of his own end zone and just kept playing. So it'll probably be something like that in the offseason. But point being, I think that Texas, from where they started, has probably sunk lower than Arizona State, from where they started. But they started in such a better place talent-wise that I think that overall losing one receiver could impact a team like Arizona State more. That being said, I think they will be kind of playing with this line. I think Clemson played as well as you can in one of these games while just getting cooked on both lines of scrimmage. Like, that's the one kind of weird thing that's happened. So every playoff game is like almost the same, where the team that wins the line of scrimmage is just belt to butt knocking you out. You can't get up. Like Tennessee had the good series against Ohio State, but after that they couldn't get up. They were just getting punched in the mouth. And the fact that Clemson was able to do that, it says something about Cade Klubnik. Says something about the culture. Unfortunately, they didn't give up. I get that. But I think that exactly to your point, where you started with Levitt, where it's like, I don't see him being Cade Klubnik in this game. This is what it's going to take. If Clemson's attack was, we are going to hand the ball off a ton of times, and that's what they were known for doing, probably would have been in trouble. And in fact, like, their running back was a little bit banged up too, so they pretty early on were like, we got to go with Klubnik, and that's the key. They didn't go into the game going, we're going to pound the air out of the football and then adjust. They knew from all the mentions of Austin with Cade Klubnik that it was going to be his show. And so, therefore, they had a game plan that worked, I think, given the circumstances. You can't fix the run defense on the fly. You can't fix, the other line of scrimmage. Now, that being said, this becomes such an issue with a team like Arizona State because, again, we get the press clippings. I think you're right on the money there, where it's like, we don't want the conversation to be about Scadaboo. We want to take it off. But, unfortunately, that's who needs to play well to win this game, because I don't see a player like Scadaboo running for 250 and 3 tutties on Texas. They can't win that way. That's how they won a lot of the year. I think that if that's happening, we're seeing Sark fire somebody on the sideline of this game. Like that is horrible for them, because in that situation, number one, you're definitely in danger of losing the game. And number two, against Oregon or Ohio State, you're in trouble. And I don't think that's what Texas has shown all year. I think that when their defense has struggled, it has been weird circumstances. Like we've talked about, it's been weird. Like, okay, well, our goal today was to control the line of scrimmage. We did that, and their second option worked. We don't really care enough to take that away, because now we start to play this cat and mouse game, and we're controlling this game. And that's my take on the Clemson thing. Again, maybe I'm viewing it from rose-colored glasses, but it felt like Texas was pretty dominant, just imposing their will. And when they needed to have something, they could have it. I've said it before, but I think that Texas's health ends up catching up with them likely in this next game. I don't think Arizona State has the horses or the game plan. Maybe if you had a quarterback like we've seen in previous years, I don't know why I keep thinking of Jordan Lynch, maybe because NIU is really big this year, but let's just say you're playing, a team that has a cool story, but it's about their quarterback, that might be a little bit different, where you could move the offense around, you could account for all the pressure, you could do that type of stuff. But I mean, now knowing that Scadaboo is also the leading receiver, it's like, look, if you have 3 dudes staring at him on every play, you're probably playing good defense.
Do you know what his? Take a guess. Well, I looked this up because I was curious. I'm like, yeah, he gets a lot of dump offs.
Yeah.
His yards after his what is it? It's his average yards after contact on catches.
Mm-hmm.
Just take a guess. What do you think that is?
Catches. Those would be small. After contact, I'm going to say, you're acting like it's going to be high, so I'm going to say it's like 8.
Like 14.
Good. My bad guess was 10. Like 14 is so wow. That is an Isaiah Bond after catch.
Yeah, like he's basically getting these passes at the line of scrimmage, and still the average like 14 yards is just insane. Like it's unbelievable. And so like you're going to see a player that is extremely difficult to be able to bring down. Like there's no doubt about it. The job that Texas does from a tackling standpoint is going to be obviously really really important, and you just can't be one of those teams that's struggling and giving broken tackles on the sideline. If you have defensive backs that aren't willing to break down in a game like this, obviously that is going to come back to bite you. But where it gets really interesting is thinking about, all right, what does it look like on 3rd and 10? How much confidence does Sam Levitt have to be able to step into some of these big time throws? He's going to be willing to test some of those Texas corners on the outside that have been so unbelievably good in coverage. Yeah, I just don't have the confidence that they'll be able to do that. But at the same time, Kenny Dillingham is kind of a wild card. I mean, it really is.
Not getting the 2 best offensive minds in the sport. If you look at what Dillingham has done with what he's done,
man, it's kind of hard to argue against that.
He's in Coach of the Year. Like that's the thing is like if you're going to put him in those talks, you got to put him up there with Sark because look at the talent Sark has. Look what he does, and it's about going with what you got. And he looked at the roster and determined exactly what he needed to do and win. Maybe if you give him 5 stars, it'd be different, but he didn't have 5 stars.
Let me clarify. I messed up that stat. I knew I was going to mess up that stat with Cam Scatterboo before. Okay, so this is yards. This is yards after the catch per catch. That is an average of 14. That's still insane. Okay,
good because I messed it up too and ended up being right.
That is. I said after catch.
I was like, that felt more natural. Hold on.
His average depth of target is 0.3 yards. That is at the line of scrimmage.
No, that's all you got to say. This man is now their leading receiver.
Yes.
And his average depth of target is 0.3.
Yes. So it's a very unique matchup. Again, I want to just throw away so many of the Clemson things that we saw because it is entirely different than preparing for a Clemson team that, I mean, even with Phil Maffa, didn't have a particularly good rushing attack. And this is just obviously going to be a different beast, but should be a great matchup. Go figure, like, Texas has a chance to get into the semifinal, and there will be so many people. If they win this game with a script like that, where it's only a 4-point win or something like that, people will still be kind of underwhelmed by Texas, and they'll be sitting there potentially in a semifinal. That's just that to me is exactly what you could hope for if you're a head coach.
This is the greatest floor raising season, really. I mean, you can talk about Josh Heupel in 2022, but we've seen. I mean, which teams have come back? Since we've been doing this podcast, very few. Texas has done that. And now you look at the season going, if everything goes wrong, and again, a little bit of a favorable matchup, Clemson sure wasn't. I mean, again, like that's a 2-time champion. Say what you will about Dabo. But yeah, it's a little bit of a favored draw. But at the end of the day, it's like, hey, played Georgia twice, lost to them twice. If you're worse than Georgia, congratulations. Welcome to college football.
Yeah. I would love to know if Arizona State, if you could have let these teams like if Texas had its choice of who it would face in this round, like you could pick, of those, like pick of any team that's left in the field, would it pick? And let's just say in this hypothetical world that had first pick, would it pick Arizona State? Would it probably pick Boise State, just because they don't have the depth of, around Genty, although they do get after the passer again in a way that I think people are discounting, but would they pick Arizona State? Maybe they would.
Well, and I don't want to do a whole tangent on this because we've talked about this before, but that is one thing that could make the playoff fun is if you do that basketball tournament style draft where you let the teams pick. Because
I want to see that. I'd love.
There's a part of me that goes, Kirby Smart just goes, I want Penn State. I'm better than James Franklin.
I'd be so here for that. That would get such crazy ratings too. You think these ranking shows, people are into those? Buddy.
Do a draft all-star game style, and have Kirby Smart up there with a visor on, going, gives a draft the coaches. Oh, buddy.
Let those teams with a first-round bye pick who they get to play. And I promise you will have that pot stirring. That would be fantastic for college football. I would love to see that. All right, speaking of Kirby, Sugar Bowl, number 2 seed, Georgia, 1.5-point favorites against number 7 seed, Notre Dame, I should say. The over-under is 6 references to how well liked Gunnar Stockton is. Man, everywhere you look.
Wait, we didn't talk about this on air. Sorry, Bevo, not going to be there.
Yes. Friend of the program, Gary Stoken, unfortunately did not confirm on these airwaves because your boy messed up and forgot to ask Gary Stoken about Bevo. But yes, Gary Stoken did say that Bevo will not be there, just as we saw in the ICC championship when he was not there.
Look, we got our assets everywhere. You know what I'm saying? If you come for Uga, justice will find you. It might take a couple of years, okay, but it'll find you.
Will is going to be on the sidelines, but Bevo won't.
Exactly. Now look, they've replaced him with one Cajun.
How about that? Love it. All right. Sugar Bowl. Yes, Georgia, everywhere you look, if you've been consuming the coverage leading up to this one, Gunnar Stockton, so well liked. Everybody loves him. You're seeing how much respect Gunnar Stockton has in that Georgia locker room. And even Kirby, he had a very noteworthy quote. He said, all the players play harder for him. That is significant for a team that just lost the preseason Heisman Trophy favorite to a season-ending injury. That's more than just this dude drives a 1984 F-150 and he loves cows. By the way, great piece by Mark Schlabach, ESPN.com. Go read about Gunnar Stockton if you want to get more coverage about how well liked he is. He's very well liked. Even he, Mark Schlabach, could not resist comparing the F-150 with over 300,000 miles on it to Carson Beck and his Lamborghini that's worth like $300,000.
It just doesn't. Now that we're past the Carson Beck era and he's already told everyone he's going pro, which good luck, man. That guy didn't seem fun to play with. It's one thing when your quarterback is like super good and confident, you know, we've seen that. But if he's not good and he's confident and he's yelling at you because he's throwing picks, oof.
It's I get the sense that he became a bit of an outsider there.
Mm-hmm.
And I usually don't want to connect too many dots, but I think we have enough with what's been said about Gunnar Stockton as it relates to Carson Beck to make us feel like that's a fair assumption to make. And maybe some of that is, he's a fifth-year guy. He's older than everybody that's been around. It's kind of like, the guy who does the victory lap in college, and you look around, you go to the bars, and you're like, wow, I'm the oldest one here, and it certainly feels like it. And maybe there's some of that's gone on with Carson Beck. I mean, think of the great players that came through in his recruiting class. Those guys are gone. Those guys are in the NFL. Like guys don't stay around for 5 years at Georgia. They hit the portal or they go to the NFL. So I wouldn't be surprised if some of that was impacting him. I don't want to say like he was a pariah in the locker room and everybody wanted him gone or anything like that. But this is noteworthy. And look, it's not even just Georgia players and coaches that have been getting this stuff out there. I heard a story about Gunnar Stockton from somebody who was at a team building event last year. And there was a noteworthy Georgia player, a guy who ended up going in the first round. He's a year older than Gunnar Stockton. And they're about to split everyone up into groups for this team building activity that they're doing. And this future first rounder goes up to the instructor and he's like, hey, I'm in for this, but I've got to be with Gunnar Stockton. Like, that's my guy. And he was like taken aback by it. He was kind of like, the guy's like third string. What are you talking? That's your guy? And if you would know like the prestige of the person who said this, you'd be like, that's okay, interesting. That's the type of stuff you file away, and you hear more and more stuff about him like this. So that's not going to be a question, whether or not Gunnar Stockton has the support of that team. How much does that matter? We'll see. We'll see. I want to see how Gunnar Stockton handles what Notre Dame is going to throw at him. I dug up the numbers of the 4 times that the Irish defense had extra time to prepare for a quarterback this season. So we're talking obviously season opener against A&M, bye week, and even college football playoff. The best performance, Curtis Rourke, it was completely ineffective for the first 55 minutes of that game. Okay.
I mean, but also you got to think about the teams too. That's the whole Notre Dame conversation. You're facing a rookie head coach at A&M. You're facing Indiana. So who's actually the bye week?
They had new Auburn quarterback and former Stanford quarterback Ashton Daniels, and then they had Brock Glenn, the highly regarded FSU true freshman, and then Rourke, who Rourke came in, is considered to be one of the 10 to 15 best quarterbacks in the country this year. And Connor Wigman, I'm certainly higher on him than most, but they did a lot of things to make Connor Wigman look like the absolute worst version of himself. I think we could say that. And when you see the numbers, you're like, wait a minute. So Rourke is the only guy among those 4 who threw for more than 100 yards. He's the only one of those guys who threw a touchdown pass. He's the only one of those guys who finished with a quarterback rating better than 109.4.
Yep. And that's, to me, that stands alone. Like, he had a great season. You know what I'm saying? Like, that is a better player. That is a better like performance. So yeah, I'm definitely with you there. Like, it isn't recency bias. It's a trend that defense is playing with your hair on fire. And not to bring up the old, wow, look at the roles reversed here. But I mean, watching that game again, they came to play. The defensive line looked like they were monsters. Like, so I think that game could help them kind of scheme for what they could do here. You're right.
Yeah, I mean, Cignetti went from saying, we kick the what out of top 25 teams to being like, oh, we've got fourth down, we've got a punt because our quarterback can't do anything in this game. So that was the Notre Dame defense on extra rest. Obviously, Gunnar Stockton is a different type of test. Is he the toughest quarterback of that group? We'll see. If you ask anybody around Georgia right now, they'd certainly say yes, absolutely, without a doubt. I fully expect him to be used as a runner. That's going to be the biggest difference between Stockton and those guys. He's going to be used as a runner a lot, and he's going to probably call his own number on these RPOs, which that matters. If you actually are trying to run those RPOs and have a quarterback, hold it at the mesh point, and you can have a quarterback that could just take off and run 15 yards. As I always say, Jake Fromm could have had 500 rushing yards if he had just decided, oh, I'm actually just going to do this 3 times a game. Instead, he would never do this. And defenses just eventually were like, you're not going to do it. What's the point? We're going to sell out to stop the run.
Now we're having this conversation. I started to bring this up against Arizona State. Who do you think is the best complementary quarterback you've seen? Not a game manager, right? Like, because you could make an argument like some of the Bama quarterbacks were game managers because they played with like, first round receivers and stuff. I'm talking about a guy who is like, we're going to run the football. Don't mess it up.
Of best quarter, give me a
that you've seen, like, because we talked about Sam Levitt. That's kind of what Gunnar Stockton needs to do. Is there a guy that sticks out to you? It's like, well, this was a great running back. Coker is like fine. But is there a guy that like really does that, could be emulated, that you could think of?
That like you think Gunnar Stockton could play like essentially in a game like this? It's a good question. I think some of the more like college focused guys and not necessarily these big time prospects make a little bit more sense, because gosh, I'm trying not to, it's hard because when you throw out game manager, I think someone like Connor Cook at Michigan State was perfect for what they tried to do.
He's up there. That's a good one.
I thought he was so effective in that role and what they tried to be. I thought early on, Trace McSorley was the perfect complement for what Penn State was trying to do.
And he started because they had Saquon. And Fromm was that, to be clear. Like Fromm, they had other objectives, but he played really well. I think the end of the story kind of colors the rest of it. There's a guy that took Georgia to a championship game.
The real example, and I'm circling around this, that I should have brought it up, is 2016 Jalen Hurts. That's kind of the guy.
Wow.
Yeah.
There's a pull. Yep.
I think before we're like, oh, hey, he's about to win a Heisman Trophy going into 2017 season, and obviously he loses national championship on the last play. Might have been a pick play, might not have been, but that's the guy where, yeah, I would say he fit into that role as just the perfect complement for what they were trying to do. And it wasn't going to be unbelievably spectacular, but he had Calvin Ridley for those big time plays. They still had enough guys in the pass and, among those pass catchers where you just felt like he was going to be in control the entire time. That's probably the best example that I can come up with.
So yeah, limit the turnovers, make some things happen with your legs. Like I can't, we've had such a limited sample size of Gunnar Stockton, who I got to shout out this nickname really quick. Our guy, Trippy D. Wrights, who's a listener, said that he's coming up with Stunaglockton. Love that.
I got another one. Fire. My guy Perry has the milkman because he likes cows so much, which you talk about complimentary. That would perfectly complement the mailman, the most clutch Georgia quarterback that's ever lived, Stetson Bennett.
Yeah. Yeah.
The milkman's not bad.
Because Stetson evolved that second year, but like year one, Stetson was also that. You know what I'm saying? Where it's like, okay, you didn't like the turnovers were down. Anyway, so point being, yeah, I think you have so few reps for Gunnar Stockton that the one pick is going to stand out a lot more. but just don't throw that ball ever, and you'll be fine. Like, if you take that play out, because we should, and you look at how he managed that game and took care of the football and the decisions he made, I don't feel awesome, because you never feel awesome when you lose your starting quarterback, but I think there's something to the guy's got a good head on his shoulders. People in the building really are high on him.
Yeah, definitely. It's better than the alternative. Who's this guy been? He's transferring from a school where he didn't necessarily fit in, and there's a lot of people that are like, "Yeah, that guy was bad news. We didn't really like him." Hopefully, he kind of works, but let's also call a spade a spade. Kirby Smart wanted to get Gunnar Stockton more reps, and because of the way Georgia's season played out, that wasn't in the cards. It wasn't in the cards for them to all of a sudden bench their first stringers in these games that were closer than expected, and they didn't get lopsided until very late in some of those instances. And so, you're looking at it from that standpoint, going, "Wow, why is he going to have moments where he's really football young?" Yeah, he could, and he's facing a Notre Dame defense that I think is going to put a ton of guys near the line of scrimmage. Why wouldn't they trust that your all-world secondary can win those matchups on the outside with Georgia's pass catchers and try and force a guy in his first career start to quickly identify pressure and figure out where are your protections and where can you get rid of the football. You don't want to play the guessing game against this Notre Dame secondary.
Yep.
They can make you pay. Will he get some help? Will he get some help with a Georgia pass catcher that says, "I got you. Don't worry. Just throw it up. Let me go make a play." Because they haven't had that all year. If Stockton really gets all the players to play harder for him, as Kirby says, Georgia's receivers going to stop dropping passes. They're going to focus a little bit more and be able to haul in the football, because I don't know that that's just the byproduct of who your quarterback is and what NIL deals he has. All right?
That would be the funniest thing ever if Georgia's receivers just came out and were gods, and Bobo was sitting there going, "I told you all about these guys." Dude. Maybe he just has too much zip on the ball and it's like bricking their hands.
They're making these George Pickens catches in a game, and there's like, what? Oscar Delp his vertical is 45 inches. What? Mm-hmm. How did this happen? They said during the SEC championship, Georgia leads FBS in drops. PFF has Georgia for 30 drops. I've heard 33 elsewhere. Take it for what it is. Georgia's dropped a lot of passes.
Too many
this
drops.
Year. Way too many. Arian Smith, he knows it. He's owned up to it this week. Every Georgia media member I saw was writing that story, and good for Arian Smith for owning it. PFF has him for 10 drops this year. His drop percentage is 17.5%. Like 1 out of every 5 times you're throwing his way, not only is it incomplete, but he's dropping the football. That's a guy that's been there for 5 years, and he's made some big-time plays. He, of course, made the 76-yard touchdown catch when the Ohio State corner fell down, and Georgia comes back into that game 2 years ago in the Peach Bowl. It's like you would hope that a guy with his experience, who's seemingly been around forever, is going to step up and make some big-time plays. But can you trust him? I don't know. And I don't know how much these Georgia receivers are really going to get separation. I think that's going to be the difficult thing. Notre Dame has allowed 270 passing yards once all year. It was Jade Mayava, who, as we'll get to later with A&M, maybe is Tom Brady, maybe is Pat Mahomes combined. I don't know. He could be. The most surprising thing, Will, would be if a Georgia receiver takes over this game. Since that Bama game, when Smith and Bell were both awesome in the second half, when Georgia was like, "Yeah, we're just going to throw it all over the yard. We're going to just start chucking it deep." Both of those guys hit the century mark that game. Since then, the only instance of a Georgia receiver having 65 receiving yards against power conference competition was when Arian Smith hit 134 receiving yards against Mississippi State, who was 2-10, bottom 10 in FBS and opposing quarterback rating.
So they're just Kane Womack merchants then.
Yeah.
I'm
going to make you apologize. If Bama pitches a shutout against Michigan, I am definitely going to make you apologize to Kane Womack.
Okay.
And I'll just bring up all these ridiculous stats that'll make me go, was he really as good as he should have been? Probably not.
I'll call Marler. That's what I'll do. I'm sure he'll have 10 stats for me about Kane Womack. I'll just walk out of it convinced.
Exactly. And look, Georgia fans, I know what you might be thinking as you hear that. Hey, stop talking about the passing game, okay? This is going to be a ground-heavy approach. I get it. You might not have to throw 300 passing yards to win this football game. But even if you get a healthy Trevor Etienne, which I believe he will be, looks great off of the month-long absence coming off the rib injury. We already talked about what he did against Texas. Um, by the way, kind of a revenge game for him against the Dome, Caesars Superdome. Can we call it the Caesars Superdome? Is
Please don't.
that okay? The Superdome. ETNs. The ETNs are 0-4 in that building. Yeah. Trevor 0-1, Travis 0-3. It's a revenge game for the ETNs against the Dome. Okay, so if you see a little bit of extra oomph behind some of his runs, he's taking it out on the Dome. All right, not Notre Dame, not anything like that. But look, Georgia's trying to do a significant offensive pivot here. Georgia only had one game all year in which it ran for 175 yards, and that was the UMass game. Okay, can that group embrace what will likely be a late season identity shift under Gunnar Stockton? I think it can to an extent. I was really tempted to pick Notre Dame, especially when Georgia fans got my mentions about like, oh my God, how could you say this is going to be an extremely difficult matchup? How could that be your takeaway watching Notre Dame against Indiana? Wow, you went to Indiana. You must be just trying to give Notre Dame all the respect in the world. No, we're not doing that. I think the Irish could present problems. Okay. That three-headed rushing attack is legit. As I've said, it's sort of a better version of Georgia Tech. I think Riley Leonard can frustrate Georgia. I think Jeremiah
Georgia
Love,
Tech was 1% better. They would have been Georgia.
Right? Would have ended it in regulation and not needed 8 overtimes for Georgia to win that game. I think it's going to be difficult, okay? Like Notre Dame is third in the country in yards per rush. This is a game plan that if you weren't looking at logos, you'd probably go, why is it Notre Dame favored by 10 points?
Yep.
How much do logos matter? How much do they matter? I question that. Well, I have this weird feeling that Notre Dame gets out to a lead. It'll line up for a field goal to make it a 2-score game. And then it's going to miss a kick, something that it struggled with during the regular season. It was much better in the first round of the playoff. Healthy kicker. But that's going to open the window for Georgia. I'll say that Georgia gets enough run defense stops late, even though that's been an issue this year, in a group that allowed less than 2 yards per carry in 4 games against playoff teams this year. I think that unit flexes late, as does the very well-liked Gunnar Stockton, who leads a go-ahead touchdown drive late, touchdown pass to Oscar Delp, 45-inch vertical on full display. Dogs win it 21-20. Did I default to the logo too much?
So here's the thing. I think that defensively, Georgia is going to play well in this game because they've shown me nothing, that says they won't do that in terms of, the big games, in terms of these moments, in terms of against Notre Dame with Kirby Smart, in terms of, what we've seen here. I think this comes down to, okay, let me do my 1,000-foot again. Talent. It's close. It's really close. And honestly,
Depends.
It's Notre Dame. I mean, because here's the deal, because the injuries thing is related, right? Where Georgia probably started off the year with more talent than Notre Dame because Carson Beck was seen as a preseason All-American watch list type of quarterback.
True.
The receivers were supposed to take a next step. Delp was going to be 75 or 80%. He was going to take a step up for when he filled in for Brock Bowers last year. Georgia has not played up to their talent level on the offensive side of the ball for sure. On defense, I think those guys have brought the wood a lot this year. I say this to say, I'm not trying to trivialize this, and I want to be so clear about this. If this does not happen, I am not blaming anyone or getting butthurt. This is all going to come down to our good friend, Mike Bobo. Because at the end of the day, there really is no logical reason this Georgia offense should play well against this Notre Dame defense. If you use logic and you say, what is Notre Dame good at? They have these swamp monsters. They're not swamp monsters. They're from Indiana. That's not a swamp. They have
not originally from Indiana.
Well,
that,
no,
right?
but they're up there. It's not the swamp. It's like ice. They're Yetis. There we go. They're ice monsters. And so, point being, like they have these people up front. They have this. The past defense has been solid. Okay, if Georgia wants to win this game, it is going to be on the fact. And again, ATN is not Derrick Henry. We could compare him to different. We can compare Gunnar Stockton and talk about what he needs to do. But at the end of the day, we need to see a lot more drives like that one, in the second half of the SEC championship game, where it was kind of a little bit of that trickeration. It would be such a poetic thing that Mike Bobo is known for. A little bit of the power pitch, screen pass. Why are you guys doing this? Back in the day. Now that's exactly kind of what this offense needs, because they, again, do not have a factor back you can give 30, 45, 30, 40 touches to, like Alvin, not Alvin. I turned him into Alvin Kamara. Ashton Genty. They don't have that Georgia running back. And ETN has been awesome in big games, but he's a player, as we've discussed, that you want to save him a little bit for these big moments, for the kill shot drive. You don't want to just waste ETN carries because he's not built that way. Even his brother was a little bit bigger than him, and he might be a little bit better of a player, but that's what he adds as a runner, in the pass game and all that. So, point being, I think that if you want to use logic, there's no reason why this Notre Dame defense should struggle with a backup quarterback. Okay. But I look at how Mike Bobo made adjustments in that SEC championship game with no Carson Beck. And it just makes me think that if they could stick to that, if we can avoid the bad pick that we talked about, which is just as bad as any pick as Carson Beck has thrown, but guess what? It was just one of them. That's the difference. Carson Beck would just go out there and do it again like he did against Florida. I mean, there was no reason why that Florida game was close other than Carson Beck was just like, I think I'm Joe Burrow, And at the end of the day, like, I have been trying to figure out this Georgia offense all year. I'm sure Georgia fans have been there with me. Maybe it was simpler than I thought it was. I tried to blame Bobo. I tried to blame all these different things, but I think Carson Beck is just a little bit, let me use an old Southern word here, a little bit of a goober. He's a little bit of a guy that, to your point, what they needed. Say what you will, but he was not a guy that made the receivers play better. He was not a guy that said, hey, put it on me when things went bad. It was a little bit of the blame game. It was a little bit of the lack of leadership. Whereas having a guy like Stockton, who, I'm not talking about the off the field stuff, I'm talking about knowing that you have that, because it felt like every game Georgia was walking into this year, they're like, we got Aaron Murray, we're going to be good. And it's like, that guy never really showed up,
Whoa. Is that a shot fired at Aaron?
No, Aaron's really good. That was my point. Like, they thought Carson Beck was Aaron Murray. They thought he was going to be that guy who was going to, Murray still, I think, has all the records over there. Like, he was going to be that franchise quarterback for Georgia, go to the NFL, have this like long career under Kirby. And I just think he regressed this year, and they couldn't really plan for it. And so I think that made the offense, and it made Bobo look worse than he actually was, because when you see a backup quarterback come in and again make a decision that Bobo had nothing to do with on that pick, the parts that were within the flow of the scheme, it was about a little bit of the end around, a little bit of the move sideline to sideline, because you can't push the tackles forward, and you're not going to be able to against Notre Dame. If you come out and say, we are going to do 3 yards in a cloud of dust, we are going to run the ball up the middle 30 times, it's not a good game plan against this team. You got to find a way to be a little Todd Monken-esque in that way, to find those holes in the zone, to get guys in non-traditional roles, to line some guys out up split wide, So point being, I think I hate to trivialize it, but I think it's gonna come down to that, because I know the Georgia defense is gonna play well in this game. I that's one thing that I can guarantee you with Kirby Smart. Either they're gonna play well for the whole game, or they're gonna play poorly for the first half, and Kirby Smart is going to have them all outside the stadium, and he's going to find some guys that can in the second half, and I've seen that too.
Here's where I'll push back.
Okay.
I don't care if Carson Beck is taking a Lamborghini, his private jet deal. I don't care what he's doing off the field, whatever, all that stuff. I don't care if he doesn't speak to a single teammate and all that stuff when it comes to between the lines and catching the football. Catch the football. You are catching passes from a guy that you've, in theory, had no shortage of time to be able to work with. Mm-hmm. And now if we're talking about a situation which Carson Beck isn't necessarily putting in that work and developing a rapport with these receivers, all right, that's one thing. Catch the football. Catch the football. That's what you're there to do. You are time and time watching this Georgia offense be just totally out of sync as a result of those drops. And while it's not entirely all on those guys, and Beck definitely deserves some blame, and I think you've seen his frustration boil over, and yeah, maybe there are some things he could be doing away from the field that would help those relationships. Again, I don't want to connect those dots. I don't want to assume that I know all of those things and all of those details, and that all of these comments are just a result of how Beck's year has played out. But catch the football. Catch the football.
I agree. Like, to be clear, but it's all related, right? It's the fact that these receivers took 2 steps back. It wasn't that they took a step forward. And you could talk about the coaching. You could talk about the recruiting. You could talk about all of that. But at the end of the day, that's not changing, So at the end of the day, as a quarterback, you got to know that you have receivers that struggle with that. You got to work with them extra, because these guys aren't bums. They're not MAC receivers. And if they are, what are we doing, Chaney? You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So point being, like, I think it is Chaney, right? I feel like I got lost in all that the receivers coach, because they hired another guy back. But anyway, not worth getting into right now. But like, point being, like, I know the receiver position has not been great for them, even historically, right, since Pickens. But the concept of you're supposed to have a franchise quarterback. Look what Josh Allen is doing in the NFL right now, where it's like, oh, you're throwing to these garbage men and you're still making it work. Beck was supposed to be that type of talent. So the fact that he wasn't, I don't want to go back and be like, oh, these receivers were never that good. Well, if you have, these great, any receiver can look great with a great quarterback. We've seen that so many times, these different systems. So point being, I think that, like, I'm not trying to dump on the kid. I'm not trying to do that. And I'm not talking about, Gunnar Stockton was picked first in the school dance or whatever. I'm talking about when Carson Beck made a mistake, he never struck me as a guy who was like, hey, my bad. He never struck me as a guy who was like, we're going to figure this out. It was a lot of just like disdain. And like, I just felt like he wasn't the leader this team needed. And I think there was Stockton.
Maybe.
Like I said, at least you know what you got. Like, that's my thing about the backup quarterbacks at all, is that I would rather have a guy that I know what I got, a la Coker, like we talked about, versus a guy who's going to go out there and expect to be Aaron Murray, when in reality, he's probably this season the most risky Georgia quarterback that we've seen.
Follow how these Georgia receivers progress during this playoff run. And I say run because it's a possibility that this could be 3 games that they play, or it could be 1 game. And if you don't think that Georgia can lose a game like this, and tell me why Vegas still has that spread sitting there at 1.5 points. It's a game in which Georgia cannot afford to play a C-plus game and expect to win. Okay. And I do think that it's going to come down to those critical moments with Gunnar Stockton. Got to be able to make big time throws. Got to have your guys on the other end feel inspired enough to catch the football. That's a bad way to put it. We won't put it like that.
I'll say too, I mean, the 2 Texas games made a combined 0 sense. That's the thing. Like, Georgia just came, oh, your quarterback's hurt? Oh, okay, well, who cares? Oh, well, this is going, like, your other quarterback has like 3 picks and he's playing, like, doesn't matter. Oh, now you're not going to win by 50. You're going to win by 20. And so, point being, like, that's the thing, is that every time Georgia has come out and been this team, it has been so inexplicable that I'm just like, Notre Dame is the one that's going to end this weird magical ride this year. I don't know. Like I said, it would be hard for me to pick here. If I were betting money, it would be Notre Dame for sure. But I'm kind of there with you that it's just hard for me to imagine the game script where they just have no answers for Notre Dame after seeing their backs against the wall this season and them just smoking a better Texas team twice.
Kirby Smart, 35-1 against non-SEC teams since the start of 2017. Pretty good. Lone loss in the building that he will be in. Not the Caesars Superdome, just the Superdome. Game that he lost to Texas in the Sugar Bowl. Notre Dame, 3-23 against AP top 5 teams since 1999. Last time that they won against a top 5 team at a neutral site, Texas A&M, Cotton Bowl, 1992. Who could forget? Yeah. I was really hoping that was going to be a Jimmy Carter administration stat. It was not, unfortunately. Yeah.
RIP GOAT. Yeah.
Will, you want to recap some SEC bowl games?
Let's do it, man.
Actually, let's get an update on Iowa and Mizzou for the people who are approaching this via like newspaper. Wow, the over is almost hit already. It's 21-14.5. 21-14.5. Brady Cook is just calling his own number repeatedly in this one. He's got 10 rushes for 60 yards. He's got 200 total yards at the half, but allowing 21 points to Iowa. Dang. That is not great for the old Mizzou defense, but yeah, we will keep the people up to date on the result of that because nobody will know the result of that by the time they listen to this podcast. All right, Gasparilla Bowl. Florida beats Tulane. We already sort of did a recap of this one. Sort of, not really. Some bad picks for Lagway. Some really bad picks in this one. Credit John Summerall, who I thought did a really nice job of kind of disguising coverages, confusing a freshman quarterback. Florida was just the much better team. And it was one of those games where you looked up and you're wondering, how is Florida only winning 6-0 when they're moving the football seemingly at will and Tulane can't do anything? Ty Thompson was not exactly, let's just say he didn't end the day improving his portal value. He was in the portal at the time of this game, which that just goes to show you bowl games in the year of 2024. But maybe in the big picture, long-term view for Florida, maybe it's better for Lagway that he didn't have his best game and that they didn't win this one pretty. I mean, the score is still offside. What was it, 33-8 or something like that? Weird final score. But Lagway doesn't have his best game. He can still kind of treat that as like, hey, that's motivation for the offseason. I still got a lot of work to do. I think he still would have approached it that way anyways. It's not like if he'd come out and just 350 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, no picks. He's like, I'm good for the offseason. I don't think Lagway is wired like that, but
Right.
ultimately you can kind of spin it like this. If you're him, if you're that coaching staff, hey, we got some things that we need to be able to work on, despite the fact that, look, you win your final 4 games. And I do think that Florida, by winning this, gets to clinch ultimate good vibes team. Could do a little bit more to get that, opinion universal if it, could get some guys in the portal. I still think they'll do that. The portal is closed, but guys who are in it still can be able to pick whatever teams they want. And you can still go out and say, like, hey, we can get a Keandre Lambert-Smith post-spring. Like we've seen, Jordan Addison was a post-spring addition for USC a couple years ago. That's a position where you really can plug in a little bit more than you can at like quarterback or something like that. So, it's going to be interesting to see kind of how they approach with that. Maybe the Branch brothers, who knows if that's going to be a possible destination for Florida as well. But I think they are far from finished with the pieces that they're going to try and add around Lagway, despite the fact that the window has kind of closed. And as we've talked about, it seems like there were other teams that were more active early on, especially at the receiver spots. I thought Nick Anderson would have been a really nice guy to pair with DJ Lagway, and LSU was quicker to the punch on that one.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's what's so crazy is I'm always a little bit skeptical with the Billy Napier hype. Like we've talked about, he did win 2 pretty big games back to back this year, which is like a really big deal for momentum. But like, I'm just scratching my head on like, I think they need a couple of receivers, and I feel like that was all they needed, in my opinion. I don't know their depth chart like that. Like I'm sure they could have used some other guys, but in terms of like, hey, you need 2 or 3 receivers, and I'm all in on this team, and I'm sitting here looking up and down, I'm like, who are those guys? I think the Branches would do it. I think that's a guy that's a couple of guys that are still there. But yeah, I'm like, you have DJ Lagway, and again, you guys were like, I made the joke, but it's real. If you guys were kind of in or out with Billy all year, like you're getting ready to pay the buyout, so you have money. I was expecting them to come out gangbusters in the portal and basically do what Ole Miss and LSU did because they have the juice, they have the mo. Who doesn't want to play with Lagway right now?
Can I throw out something that is just the most message board thing ever? But
Please.
This isn't going to happen. Okay, I'm not predicting that this is going to happen necessarily, but it would be incredible if it did. Let's say Ryan Day gets fired. 30-day window. Jeremiah Smith on the open market. What kind of DM offers is he getting? Because they are silly. Absolutely silly. And especially after what he did to Jermod McCoy, who I do think is one of the best cover corners in all of college football, and he took him to lunch. I mean, Jeremiah Smith would get so much from teams like Florida. He'd be like, look, 2 years, $10 million. You want $5 million a year? Come play here. Come play with DJ Lagway. I'm not saying that he would leave or anything like that. I don't know. It would, so much of that probably would depend on the situation of like who's replacing Ryan Day. What's the quarterback of the future situation looking like? Is Julian Sayin going to end up being the guy there? Did he stay at Ohio State? Did he transfer? I don't know. It's tough to keep track of all this stuff. But Jeremiah Smith in the open market with a receiver needy team like Florida would just be an incredible transaction to watch unfold. It probably won't happen, but I don't know. It'd be really fun if it did.
Well, that's the thing. We know they're going to end up with somebody. That's always fun. To your point about like, I'm trying to think about the spring window because like I was shocked when LSU got Jaden Daniels. I thought it was going to be Nuss or one of the other guys hanging out. So the times that teams have needed someone going into it, I'm fascinated because it might be here's another one. Guys on playoff rosters, period.
They can still hit the portal. They can still hit the portal. Yeah.
Like we're hearing, what's his name? Boo Carter had a lot of like rumblings that like Tennessee,
staying at Tennessee.
Yeah, like Tennessee paid because he was thinking about it in the portal. So like that's the thing. And they might just have verbals from like 5 playoff teams and guys start losing and they start. So I don't want to like be too. It's just weird that the portal is like going one way out of Florida when this team finished the way they did. Like I feel like this would be again Lane Kiffin is always a hopium merchant. That's why he does so well in the portal. It's like, this is exactly the Lane special right here. You just won a bowl game against Tulane. You got like 2 big win anyway. But I think they'll figure it out in terms of the receivers. I'm just interested to see who it is.
Yeah, if we're going into fall camp and we're looking around like, why wasn't Florida more aggressive in the portal? Could they not get NIL funding to be able to get some of these big-time targets? I think that's a more concerning conversation. And that would be really tough because obviously you can sell Lagway to anybody. And why wouldn't you want to play with a guy like him if everything else lines up? And that would probably be an indication that things didn't line up. But Florida gets to 8 wins, gets to 8-5 after the year that was. Go figure. Just a
And we said
wild
preseason.
week.
Now, granted, they had 7 regular season wins, but remember the predictor? It was like if Florida gets to 8 in the regular season, they'll be in playoff talks.
Yeah,
That's how bad that schedule was.
Yeah, I got Kelly Ford at 8-4 for the projection there of like Florida would have been worthy of playoff conversation. But yeah, 8 wins, including the bowl victory. Nice for Florida to be able to cap that off. First bowl victory since 2019. Yeah. Crazy. Not quite a Miami losing streak when it comes to bowl games. Miami has not lost 13 consecutive bowls, despite what Danny Cannell tweeted. They won one of the last 13. They won a bowl game 2016. People forget that, but
they sure did.
Yeah. I don't know why DK did that. Anyway, Armed Forces Bowl. Holy cow, Will. I am so happy that we no longer have to watch the 2024 Oklahoma offense. You told Oklahoma fans, they're like, don't watch this game. You couldn't have been more right. Watch the first quarter, then go do something else. Just assume that they won. Yikes.
You know what's funny, dude? I've never been more right than about these meaningless bowl games. I was like dang near perfect on these bowl games, down to the point where I said, and we'll get to the Pavia thing where I was like, they're gonna have like some paint on their jersey, and that literally happened. But it was dude. When I saw that quarterback for the 95-yard touchdown for Navy, I just went, oh no, this is the best day of this guy's life.
Dude, Blake Horvath, deceptively fast.
I don't think he's fast. I don't think he's deceptive. Everybody almost caught him. He was just too big to bring down. They tackled him.
I think he's just fast. Like, yeah, but you got to be fast to be a service.
95 yards is a long way. To be fair, you know, all the PT in the
history. They've been playing football since like the Civil War.
Before that, in the Merrimack playing for Navy football. Anyway,
there was like 12 states when they were playing football, and longest running school history. It's unreal.
Fair, yeah.
And to be clear, the Oklahoma offense that we saw in this game wasn't really the Oklahoma offense that we saw during the regular season, but it was kind of the story of the Oklahoma offense, if that makes sense. It was a variation of it, and it was another bad variation of it. To blow a 14-0 lead against a service academy, we respect the troops. We do. Okay. But we see Venables make the decision to go for 2. And after they have this drive that looks like it's going to tie the game, maybe we're going to get overtime. And he says, it's like, no, we're going for 2. I wonder in that moment, what's his confidence level that they're actually going to convert?
I think he's just trying to avoid injuries for the offseason.
Dude,
he's like, get me out of here, bro.
He's like, get me out of here. I can't watch this offense anymore. This needs to end now. We either win this or we lose this. I'm not taking this into overtime. And instead, Michael Hawkins takes a sack against a free rusher. It was bad. Basically, after, and it started off so good too. That was the crazy thing, is that they get off to this 14-0 lead. Hawkins makes a play that was unreal. He goes all the way to his left, realizes there's nothing there. I'm going to work all the way back to my throwing side, find a guy, Kearney, 56 yards downfield. His last name is spelled the same way that Kearney, Nebraska was. My first job out of college, the Kearney Hub in Kearney, Nebraska. So that's, if I ever say Kearney, guys, that's why. But he makes this play where he just drops it in a bucket, and you're like, Michael Hawkins, you showed up, man. Like, you're ready to go. That was it. That was it for the OU offense. At one point,
and to be clear, losers online were like, this is what happens when you get an SEC team matched up with a service academy in a bowl game. That's why the SEC's. What is wrong with y'all?
Guys, like, it was not going to be 60 minutes of fun from the Oklahoma offense. It was not.
Have you ever seen the Oklahoma offense? How did you think that was? Anyway.
At one point, I'm curious if anybody watching this picked up on this. I definitely did. At one point, they were doing this return from commercial break, and it's one of those production meeting things where they're like, we're going to talk about, how great the history of Oklahoma quarterbacks are. It's just kind of what you do on a national broadcast. All right, whatever. They showed, the great quarterbacks the last 25 years with Heupel and White, Bradford, Baker, Kyler, like all these guys. And the very next plays, 2 plays, Hawkins tries to throw a quick out. It's like the same exact play. The first throw, it's a drop. You're like, that's bad. Second play, he changes his arm angle, and it's not particularly close. And you're like, wait a minute. Oklahoma can't complete a pass, the simplest of passes. It can't even do that after we just showed this great history of these quarterbacks. This feels so wrong to even say that that's part of the same group. And then right after that, they get a delay game penalty because they can't even get the play in. And you're just like, what are we watching? This is terrible. This is so bad. And it was just so fitting for how frustrating this offense was, some of which definitely injuries and whatnot. We talked ad nauseum about losing your top 5 receivers, in September and how bad that was, whatever. But Hawkins had a chance to show his new OC something. Like Ben Arbuckle is the quarterback's coach in this game. He's coming over from Washington State, the most important hire of the Brent Venables era, bar none.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there was any world in which Arbuckle is going to come from Washington State and be like, yeah, I'm going to start Hawkins over my guy, John Mateer, who I'm bringing with from Washington State. Like, that wasn't going to happen. But that post first quarter showing from Hawkins.
But now it's much easier to explain to people where it's like, well, you saw that bowl game, right?
Don't sell this to me as a battle or don't do that crap. Like, and Venables, he took Jackson Arnold to SEC Media Days. He was the only sophomore there. So say what you want about Venables' indecisiveness at the quarterback position with putting in Hawkins first half of their SEC debut. But I do think in the offseason he'll be a little bit more, I think, forthcoming with who they're going to start, because it will be John Mateer as long as he stays healthy. Maybe Hawkins transfers post-spring. I don't know. I think he should stay and improve under what's considered one of these decorated up-and-coming offensive minds. That's what Arbuckle is. But think about this too, Will. And this is something to remember for all SEC teams, right? Not just Oklahoma. 10 of 16 SEC teams started multiple quarterbacks this year.
Okay.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
That's odds are you are going to need someone else to start. And that could be a prime opportunity for you, maybe not to win that specific job, but set up your next opportunity. And I don't know, like I look at Hawkins' situation, like that guy's not ready to start at another place. He can do some things well, but over the course of 60 minutes, I watched it time and time again. The flashes are there. If you just want to pull up a clip or two of him, you can convince yourself that he's going to be a guy. But you kind of see it over the course of 60 minutes and you go, that's really not great. And I know the surroundings were not good either. It was like their 9th different offensive line combination. I don't want to talk about the Oklahoma offense anymore. I'm kind of done with it. It's so bad.
Yeah, I will just say this. Hey, man, if I had a nickel for every time an SEC team lost the Armed Forces Bowl on the last play of the game in the low 20s, I would have 2 nickels. And what happened to the other team? Mizzou. And what happened to the other team?
Yeah, good call.
They did exactly that. And they lost to like a last-second field goal. And what did they do after that? They brought a new offensive coordinator, and they figured out their offense. So there's some hope for you Oklahoma fans. Not in love with what you've done in offense. That's not really a secret. I don't think anyone is. I don't think the players' mamas are in love with what they did on offense this year. But that being said, you can be exactly here and be just fine the next year.
They had a season in between that.
Well,
Armed Forces Bowl and bringing in Kirby Moore as the OC. Right? Yeah, because the Armed Forces Bowl was 21, I want to say. And Kirby Moore comes in 23. So they had a season in between then.
But that's what I'm saying, where the story ended out there. You're right. It wasn't the same offseason. So I got a little bit too greedy with the comps there. Yeah. But point being, I can remember that bowl game where it was like, Mizzou's cooked. Like, this is so embarrassing. Da-da-da. And so, yeah, maybe I just like Venables. I don't know. I'm like looking back. I'm like, what did he show me this year that I like? The defense was really good. That's his thing. I'm going to give them one more chance at this. And to your point, I think the most important hire moniker, that's another good comparison to Kirby Moore, because boy, howdy, do they need to fix that offense.
Deion Burke's coming back. That's good. Going to need more help. They're continuing to add pieces in the portal at the pass catcher spots. But, yeah, gotta have the quarterback situation right. And they're following the Vandy model. Yeah, that's what they're doing. OC, quarterback, let's bring him on board. Let's do it. Worked out. Let's talk about Vandy. Let's talk about the game that was down the street from where you were. How far, honestly, was that game?
So I actually started to go to it. We talked about it on air, and then it just started the torrential downpour. Yeah. And you saw it on air, and I was joking. I was there with my nephew. We just ended up watching the game, and I always say, if you could see it on TV, it's raining bad, because you can never see rain on TV. And there's like gobs of rain coming down, and I'm like, this game is going to be instant classic. Not what I want to catch double pneumonia off of, but an instant classic nonetheless. I was locked in.
Yeah, probably not worth pneumonia. Probably not. Yeah, Diego Pavia.
Lightning delay felt very vindicated for the lightning delay.
True. At that point, though, Diego Pavia had already taken over.
Yep.
Why I would ever suggest that he would lose a coin flip game is just, that's on me. I got to be better.
Because Haynes King was on the other side. That's the thing.
I know, but that was Diego Pavia's Super Bowl. That was. And he treated it like it. At one point, Aaron said on the broadcast, he's like, did he just flip a ball to the fan? Like, was he feeling himself that much? He did like this like little somersault thing when he was getting back up. He takes the picture afterwards with the cigar. Like, he's just just juice. He is
That's the guy you talked about doing the victory lap in college.
It's Diego Pavia.
Bowl. Yeah.
Although he's looking around going, yeah, I'm just a vibe. Like, everybody get on my level.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to worry about fitting in here. You guys can fit in to what I'm doing here. Just so brash, man. Like, he's been a pleasure to watch. My only note for this game was Diego Pavia forever. And I cannot believe that you correctly nailed the end zone paint prediction, because Haynes King was covered in it. Absolutely covered in it early in this game. And I was Leo DiCaprio watching. I was like, look, it happened. They did it.
Dude, that quarterback matchup perfectly lived up to everything I thought it would be. You know, like, these two guys looked like they were fighting a war on opposing sides. There was paint. There was, like, probably some blood. There was, like, sweat. All the close shots in, like, the 8K cameras with the rain coming down. I was like, this is an old school. This is why I love college football right here, son. Like, talking to my nephew who, like, played at IMG. Like, I was becoming a Southern boomer watching Vanderbilt, Diego Pavia. Again, this is one of my favorite bowl seasons in a while, guys.
They're pretty much going to run it back.
Yeah.
That's what it looks like. And Stowers, I would assume he's going to be off to the NFL. Gosh, the catch that he made. There was at one point where Pavia is just, screw it, throwing it to Stowers, just jump ball, go get it.
Mm-hmm.
And he just comes down and makes the play. He's had a whale of a year. That's a guy that at like fall of 23, he's still thinking he's going to be a quarterback. And he has really developed into a stud tight end. And I can't wait to see, what the next level conversations are going to be like with him, because he's really coming into his own. But yeah, I mean, Jerry Kill wants to come back. I hope he wears that Vandy poncho every single game that he was wearing for this one.
Poor Jerry Kill, man. I was like, let's get him up the press box, man. He's been through too much to be out here in Birmingham. Come on, bro. I love Birmingham, but that's the thing. When he was at Minnesota, right?
Minnesota for a long time, yeah, and he's been in a lot of jobs since then. After I thought he was going to be done in football and he was just going to step down, but no, he was at Minnesota 2015, and he retired, or it looked like he was retiring, and then it's just taken no shortage of jobs since then.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that was, it was so much colder and worse up there. He was like, this feels like home to me. So, but yeah, to your point, I hope he's coming back next year to like running everything back. I'm just so fascinated by this Vandy team because, again, talking about, it's just hard with Vandy as far as what can they do in the spring window, because we talked about, their AD maybe not exactly prioritizing athletics, but then they got the contract extension and they're renovating the stadium. It's just hard to figure out where they're at as far as talent. But point being, I think they've at least created an environment where the best players are not one way out of Vandy, the way that we've seen over and over again, and the leadership there has really changed. So from a football standpoint, so I'm really excited to watch them next year. Do they start next year ranked, you think?
No, but the Pavia preseason conversations will be fun.
Mm-hmm.
And to think we're going to have SEC quarterback rankings with Pavia as one of those returning guys. Nussmeier already talked about, the Sellers, Arch, Yamaleava group. Marcel Reed is certainly part of that, and Lagway, of course. But there's just going to be a really fun group of quarterbacks, and Pavia is part of it. It's definitely part of it. And I am so glad that he has won this against the NCAA, and that the plan is for him to be able to come back, because, man, what a fun player to watch. And I hope that people who were just wondering, what am I going to do on this random Friday afternoon? Oh, Diego Pavia's on, and he's balling, and he's playing out of his freaking mind. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm going to turn that on every single time. Why wouldn't I? Because
Diego Pavia off of a win against the NCAA, coming back the next year. He had Asher Roth in the courtroom shedding one tear, going, oh my God, son, you did it. You came back. You beat my record. I mean, what a story for Diego Pavia, the king of college football.
And for those saying, like, why take the picture with the cigar afterwards and the throwing? Like, you just won the Birmingham Bowl. Like, chill out, guy. They had a winning season.
Alabama.
Undefeated in Alabama. Great point. Undefeated in Alabama.
Yeah.
They had a winning season at Vanderbilt. Come on.
Mm-hmm.
I smoked 2 cigars, 3, 4. I don't care. We did. I did the 10 best SEC moments of 2024, not just football, all sports. Mm-hmm. I put Diego Pavia, Vandy beating Bama at 4 on that list.
I feel like I already want to reminisce about that. That's how good it was. The 4th down throw, I mean, just insane.
Just meant more game.
Yep.
Might have to go there. Off season's coming up. We're going to have some content
Put in a media request to Diego's pod. We can collab in the offseason. Let's do it.
Would love nothing more in this life. Literally nothing more. All right, Liberty Bowl, Texas Tech and Arkansas. Taylor Green. Man, thank God Arkansas had Taylor Green. This game was bonkers. Weird. Just very weird. Taylor Green had 31 yards per completion.
Of course he did.
That's hard to do. It's hard to do when, I mean, his pass catchers were Isaac Tesla and then just freshmen, guys who hadn't played. Desmond James. Sorry if I'm saying, I think it's Desmond, like Jasmine with a D and a Z.
I remember that gentleman because I often go, should I know this guy's name? Am I out of the loop? And that was a guy I was like, nope, shouldn't know that guy's name. Like, he looked shocked he scored a touchdown in his picture. I remember this being like, oh, that guy just put them in a box, huh?
He was unreal. CJ Brown was really good. I mean, there were so many moments early on we just thought, is Arkansas going to have like 80 points in this game? Are they going to have 1,000 yards of offense? It's possible against this Texas Tech defense that was bad when it was healthy and looks even worse now. The angles that they take in the secondary, oh my God, anything is possible. That didn't end up happening. It ended up being a little bit of a strange game because the second quarter was just the exact opposite of that. But really only one bad quarter for the Arkansas defense, and the rest of it, they kind of did exactly what they would hope to do against a Taj Brooks-less Texas Tech offense. But a nice way for Arkansas to be able to close the season. A nice way to go into this offseason after, look, I think if you had told Arkansas fans coming into this season that you would have a 3-win improvement and you would beat a playoff team, I think they would have said, that sounds great. And then they would have said, what's the portal situation, though? And then that's the part we got to remind them. You got 29 guys that have left in the portal. It's kind of a lot. But at the very least, the people that were saying at this time last year, Arkansas is back in the Chad Morris levels of SEC bowels, they are not in that place. They definitely are not. And a big part of that is because the Taylor Green thing, I think for the most part, is worked out. Now, he's still a guy that makes way too many mistakes. Who, look, we just mentioned all those quarterbacks coming back next year. Taylor Green is on the fringe of that conversation. I don't think he's going to start off as an all-SEC quarterback or anything like that. But you have a guy. You have a guy that can do a variety of different things, who can really take advantage of some lesser defenses. I mean, he certainly showed he could do that this year. And he's going to be a unique guy to have to prepare for. And what they do in the portal will be really, really interesting. But this could have been a whole lot worse than what it was for Arkansas. There are a lot of teams that wish they could be sitting there with 7 wins and a bowl victory with a quarterback who was fun to be able to watch this year. And I know that sounds like we're saying, oh, just accept whatever we give to you and don't ever compete for championships. That's not what I'm saying. But it just could have been a lot worse. And Arkansas,
your goal for the season was what? Embrace the hog. Did you do that or did you not? I think you embraced the hog.
It felt embraced. It did. It really did.
Had a competitive game with Texas.
Had a competitive game with Texas. You beat the Tennessee team that ends up going to the playoff. Like there were moments that didn't make you feel like crap. Now, obviously, you would have liked to have stayed on the same field with Ole Miss. That would have been ideal. You would have liked to have been able to close out a game against an Oklahoma State team that did not end up winning a Big 12 game. That would have been ideal. Your season could have gone differently if you could have held on against A&M. These things, though, I think in the grand scheme of things, is that a sign that your program is falling apart and is on the outs? Absolutely not. But still, Sam Pittman's going to go into next year the same way that he went into this year, fighting for his job. That's still going to be the case. He is not all of a sudden like, oh, hey, give him another extension. He's going to be locked in for the next 4 years. Now, he did get, as Steve Berkowitz reported for USA Today, that $250,000 raise that we were talking about, which is so funny to think that this game was, got him to a winning season, got him a bowl victory and all that stuff.
I would push back on that though, because think about where they were last year. And let me take a quick side tangent.
Well, if he goes 4-8 next year, he's gone. Like,
no. I mean, you don't go 4-8 in the SEC. The fact that he survived a 4-8 season is what. But I'm saying,
that's my point.
You said it's like a similar place, and I'm saying, like, bro, going into last year, it was like we hired Bobby Petrino, we brought in this dude from Boise State.
Yeah, it's different.
We're talking about, so like I will say they built for sure in a linear way, and I think that's really impressive. And this would be a good cover. I want to hold myself accountable to see if I can remind you of this for media days. You had a really good line of questioning to Taylor Green about Bobby Petrino. I would wonder how that relationship will change after that bowl game.
It's a good question.
Where it's like, okay, I mean, 11 completions for 341 yards. How do you do that? How physically do you do that? Is that possible? You got the gentleman, Desmond James and Isaac Tesla, entirely too many A's in that name. I mean, just what are we doing with that name?
He gets it mispronounced all the time, like Tesla.
Dude, on the podcast, they were doing the Tesla. And I was like, it's kind of like the joke we have about 24/7 versus 247 Sports.
Yeah.
If it isn't Tesla and you're guessing that, you sound goofy. So just don't.
True.
And so point being, like, I this was the Apex Taylor Green game. Gentleman had the whole tied for the lead in rushing, right? 81 yards. Had 341 yards, inexplicably on 11 completions. Played the most Taylor Green game. You know what I'm saying? But it was just him out there. To your point, I don't want to take away from the two guys we talked about. Don't want to talk about that. But this season, honestly, this bowl game ended up mattering, I think, because if they show up with nobody, they had the weird situation with the offensive lineman I'm not going to get into, but it could have been an all-time vibe changer for a season where you come out and just look like you have nobody left and it's like we have nothing to be excited about. Taylor Green, of course, straps it on. And like I said, I think Bobby Petrino was probably good either way. I think Pittman was good either way. Getting a bonus is helpful. A bonus versus an Instagram graphic that's pixelated, definitely different situations. But point being, I think that Bobby Petrino has got to at some point lay his little sash down and be like, look, you didn't play within the flow of the offense. I screamed at you all game, but you had about 350 and you was the game. So it would be nice to you this off. I don't think he's going to be nice. Bobby, he's not situationally aware.
No, I would love to know what that relationship is like, though, moving forward. And because clearly Bobby is still Bobby, and there are still going to be those moments. I don't expect that to change with Taylor Green, even though he's played a lot of football. I think that'll still be the case for Arkansas moving forward. All right, let's close with the Vegas Bowl, Will. So I'll be honest. I don't often say this. I guess I am saying this because we're not currently watching this Mizzou-Iowa game. Update. Iowa's still up 21-14. Second half has started. They're 3 minutes in. Just in case the people wanted to know.
Good.
Update. All right. I don't know if I'd say this, but I did not watch the second half live because I don't think it started until 12:30 on the East Coast.
Bro, I started to text you, and I'm like, I don't want to make him feel bad. I mean, because, dude, that game started way too dang late. I was on Central Time, and I was getting EP by halfway through the third quarter. And I turned it off when A&M scored in the second half. I was like, oh, they got this.
Yeah.
And then, again, it was about 2 a.m. I'm like, okay, USC. And one thing about USC, I'll just say really quickly, is despite everything, that is a team that just knows how to look cool. But did you see the guy get hurdled? I mean, that's one of the most electric looking returns I've ever seen. The fact, because hurdles, I'm not going to say they're overrated, but they're kind of like blocks in basketball where they look sick, but then they usually get you about a yard or two. Fully hurdled a dude, almost hurdled a second dude. The picks, the catches, I'm like, where was this team outside of LSU and Texas A&M?
They just have dudes. They find dudes all over the place, and they certainly had some that were testing the A&M secondary. But yeah, I made a business decision. I said, you know what, guys, I'm not going to watch this one live when we weren't recording the next day. If we were recording the next day, I would have stayed up and watched that. But I hope A&M fans did the same thing you did. Just turn this game off. Just turn this game off. And when it's 24-7 and just assume that everything's going to work out just fine. Saw everything you need to see. But I had to go back and catch it afterwards. Even if you just turn this game off at that point, where there's 5 minutes left in the third quarter, it's 24-7. USC has the ball deep in its own territory. You probably would have gone to bed thinking, hey, Aggies get to 9 wins. Solid way to close year one of the Elko era. But as Elko said afterwards, it's tough to close games when you can't play zone coverage at all. You just have no idea. That's how you blow a 24-7 lead, which A&M did. TD, that kind of got USC going, where if you go back and watch it, A&M linebacker and DB, they both just cover the tight end, and Jacoby Lane slips behind them. Good recognition by Mayav on that play. A&M couldn't take advantage of turnovers. They missed chip shot field goals. They were bad in short yardage situations on third down. They had freshman corners who just could not challenge those dudes that USC had. It's kind of a tough combination, all those things working against you.
Also, another great reminder to just never care about recruiting, because I remember being so sad when LSU didn't get Des Ricks, and I'm watching him out there going, this guy looks like he's never played football before. He was getting cooked in that second half, bro.
Yeah, it's tough for a freshman in that spot.
Yeah.
Very difficult, I think, to be a freshman cornerback playing at this level of football. And some guys get exposed and some guys do what they can to not get exposed. And that was certainly not the best day at the office for him. But yeah, look, if A&M knows how to defend a slant or play in zone coverage, we're probably having a much different conversation right now. So I don't want to harp too much on the results. Like it's some sign that Elko doesn't have anything going at the end of year one. But you were sitting there as the last SEC team unbeaten in conference play going into November, right? You were sitting there in just such a favorable spot. We talked about how advantageous that was coming off the LSU win. And man, this is working out as well as A&M could have ever possibly hoped. Not only do you not make it to Atlanta, you lose your last 4 games against power conference competition.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing we knocked Kevin Sumlin for. Now it's a year one coach, so it's entirely different to do that in year 1 versus year 5, okay? But the calendar turns to November and it's a collapse. That's been the A&M cadence for the majority of the playoff era. Since Johnny Manziel left College Station, we've had now 11 seasons post-Manziel. Here is A&M's year-by-year records once the calendar turned to November. Okay, 3-2, 2-3, 1-4, 2-3, 4-1, 3-2, 5-0. Jimbo actually started 12-3 in those first 3 years of post-October games, which fueled that extension that he got after 2020. And then after that, 2-2, 2-2, 2-3, 1-4. That's 7-12 in post-October games in the past 4 seasons. It's kind of hard for people to think differently about you when that trend continues. And that's going to continue to be the thing that Mike Elko is fighting against. It's not, can you get talent in the door? It's not, can you even find, a quarterback that you can build around? It's not, can you find the right coordinator to do this, that, or the other? Can you just avoid these November collapses that A&M has become way too much of a punching bag for? And I mean way too much just from a sense of, like, you just can't be that bad down the stretch when you're spending those types of resources on football. You can't be the team that runs out of gas, coach after coach, season after season. And that's the biggest thing that Mike Elko has to be able to overcome. That'll probably define his tenure in College Station.
Yeah, and it's so interesting, right? Because it's like they made a quarterback switch that we lauded them for, and it was ultimately, I think, pretty clearly the right switch. But then the defense just kind of fell off a cliff, and with a running quarterback, that just doesn't make any sense to me. Like if it had been the inverse, and you started with Reed and he didn't have the juice, and you put in Wigman, it's like, like you're playing twice the amount of game now because you're throwing the ball twice as much. That's weird, man. Because that's the thing that I would hang my head on, and I will say too. Not to rub salt in the wound here, but some of those A&M teams weren't good before November either. There was a Jimbo team that missed a bowl game. So you're right about November, but I do want to say like what they did up until November was very different.
With someone they were good though.
Yeah, no. Someone's like, it's tough because he has like the arrest and everything, and he's just kind of like, it's not like he's leading some championship program. Wasn't great at Arizona, but not like he won that breakup either. I think it was just a lose-lose. But I think that his time at A&M is going to be looked better, especially with Manziel and all that. So point being, I don't exactly know what to do about that. I mean, maybe it's a little bit of Elko. He showed some immaturity this year, man. And I don't want to just blame it on that, but I don't know what happens when you have one of the best defensive minds in the sport and, you're shutting down these offenses. You're shutting down, making Nussmeier look horrible when he's on the path to be, a Heisman invite at that level. He's playing like the best quarterback in the SEC or close to it with, Jackson Dart and Pavia, but just completely like kind of destroy that season. And again, you lose to South Carolina, whatever. But you can't have all this, the Auburn game. Okay, whatever. That's weird Auburn, but like the way they lost the Texas game where it's like, man, you got that weird turnover at the end of the game. You just got stopped at the goal line. Like same deal with USC. You're controlling the game, man. Like it's not like you're getting blown off the field. It's not like you're, whatever. It's like these key decisions and there's, maybe year 1 and year 2, Elko is going to be different, but it's almost like he got too much dip on his chip after the first couple months of the season. Maybe. And he started trusting himself too much. because those decisions, right? The fourth down call against Texas, it's like he's a little bit too bold and brash. And it's like, bro, like, you're the defensive guy. Like, you're not the offensive guy. Like, you need to just sit back and be great at defense. So, again, I've said it over and over again. This season was a win to me once A&M beat LSU. I think that for that point in that season, as high as they were ranked, being in the conversation for the playoff and for the SEC championship, as late as they were in that season, say what you will about schedule technicalities, scheduling Notre Dame, not embarrassing yourself, that loss has aged really well. But I think that Elko specifically, weirdly, has a lot to look at, because I don't really want to blame these players for this outside of Des Ricks, which this is mostly his fault.
It's a strange year. It's a strange year. And you can spin it in a lot of different ways. You definitely can, because I thought down the stretch once, I was talking to David Nuno at Texags about this, about how their stud defensive linemen, who these guys all opted out of this bowl game, which, all right, like, that's not necessarily stunning. That's Stewart and Shamar Turner and Nick Scorton. Say it again.
The Shamars.
that those guys in Scorton opt out of the bowl game. All right, like, you're going to struggle to get pressure probably in a game like this, but it was kind of that way throughout the last month. And maybe this A&M secondary, once they didn't have the benefit of those defensive linemen speeding up quarterbacks, they didn't look quite as good. And that's maybe too simple of an answer for some of this. There's certainly some holes in their roster that need to be addressed. Getting Concepcion from NC State is going to be a big time addition for them. I really like that complement with what Marcel Reed does, and I think that's going to benefit him a lot. And we've already talked about all the different ways you can kind of spin this A&M season, so I don't want to repeat myself too much with that. But yeah, maybe a microcosm of the season in this game. 24-7, you get up, you blow this lead when you feel like you should have been in a much better place by night's end, by season's end, than where you were at. And that's the tough pill to swallow.
Yeah, and I'll say this too. Like, I've said this pretty consistently about Texas A&M. It's pretty hard for me to feel bad for them, because it's the transfer portal era, it's the NIL era. You're always going to get your guys. Like, the thing about Texas A&M is, like, everyone there is the same kind of crazy, right? So when we've had like booster issues at like Tennessee, Auburn, Texas, stuff like that, it's because people are different types of crazy. At Texas A&M, everyone is singularly focused on winning football games, and they tried the Jimbo way. Now they've got this way, but the fact is, like, they don't really regret building those ranches. That's the thing, because it got them to beat Alabama. It got them here. It's not like there's suddenly an austerity period with the way that they're spending, right? So it's like they're always, A&M will eventually figure it out, as Miami kind of did, because they just have more money than God and they're going to be fine. So I think that having a coach that isn't Jimbo Fisher, and you give him the keys to the castle and he just burns it down, like, I think
I'd still rather be here than where they could have been if they had held on to Jimbo and been like, you know what, we got to wait a couple more years till the buyout gets to this level. No, I'd still rather be where they're at right now, and I still feel better about the future knowing that they still face this hurdle. They face this hurdle dating back to someone, and that's going to be a topic of conversation moving forward.
Yeah, and getting Scorton and getting Concepcion, 2 of the top 5 guys in each of their cycles, really big deal. So again, like, they haven't stopped spending.
Definitely. All right, well, lad of the week, lad of the century. Lad of the week doesn't do it justice. Jimmy Carter left this world at age 100. I was watching Fox NFL actually when I saw this.
Big
which
Fox
I think
News
a
guy?
lot. Say it again.
Big Fox News guy? Just kidding.
It's very difficult to talk about Jimmy Carter and not like want to get into like, politics stuff. And if you watch the movie Argo, it's kind of a tough edit for Jimmy. But we'll kind of keep it apolitical as much as possible for this. But yeah, 100 years old, was in hospice care like forever. And man, what a life. What a life. I thought about making a bunch of Jimmy Carter era references throughout. It just kind of just sneaking them in here as much as possible. And I was like, I don't want to do my guy Jimmy like that. They're natural. They naturally come up in so many different ways, and we don't need to force those. So thought it might be better to just honor someone who gave his life to this country and to people all around. I loved that tweet from Delta about how, like, when he boarded a flight, he would shake everyone's hand. Everybody's seen that video, I'm sure by now, of just Jimmy Carter just going around and everybody. And it's weird because usually if you see a video of a politician doing that, it feels slimy. You're like, all right, we get it, guy. Like, if you've watched enough shows like that, you're like, okay, we understand what you're trying to do here. With Jimmy Carter, it just felt like a nice old man who was being a nice old man in public. And there's something that felt so genuine about it. Tons of Jimmy Carter stories around the internet, and you can find ones that are way better than the one I'm about to share. So I don't mean to pretend like this is the best one. But well, I watched this show Claim to Fame. If you've ever seen it, it's on I think it's ABC and streaming on Hulu and stuff like that. And there was this guy on I think season 2 of it who was in his 20s and was just this really immature, annoying guy who thinks he's jacked and he's not, which is one of my least favorite things ever.
Mm-hmm.
And you're just wanting this guy to lose. And then as the show develops, like, and the show is basically centered around the premise of who is my famous relative, and you have to try and figure out. It's like a who's who, but in format of like, I'm related to this very famous relative, and it's your job to guess it, and that's kind of how you get eliminated or whatever. So when it becomes very clear that his celebrity relative is Jimmy Carter, it's his grandpa.
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden, everybody kind of has like a little bit more of an appreciation for him. And then when he finally gets eliminated, he lasted a really long time. He gets so emotional speaking about Jimmy Carter and this guy who is just not likable 1%. In this moment, I'm like, God, can you imagine being Jimmy Carter's grandson and how kind that guy? And of course, he shares, like how genuine of a person he was, and how much he looked up to him and how much he idolized him. This guy that seemingly hasn't said a nice word about anybody in this entire show, and then he gets to talking about Jimmy Carter, and he just becomes a human being. I just thought it was, one of those reminders that Jimmy Carter will do that to people. Unfortunately, never had the pleasure of meeting him, but wish I could have, because he seemed like an absolute legend.
Yeah, living in Georgia, the guys fingerprints are all over everything. There's like a historian that I listen to that is left of me for sure, and one of his best quotes is like, "Hey, there's one like truly kind person who became president, like one good person, and it was Jimmy Carter, and everybody hated him for it."
Yeah,
and then,
that seems right. Yeah.
Right, and then he goes on to be the best post-presidency president. He starts Jimmy Carter Foundation. He's like eradicating diseases left and right. And it's so crazy. I forget about this, and we've talked about this in the pod. My neighbors are amazing, amazing, sweet people. You'd love them. Michael and Lindsay. Lindsay works for him, and she was like, RIP, or like rest in peace, and gave a tribute to my boss. And I was like, wow, that's actually crazy, kind of how involved he is on kind of the scene here. And it's crazy. It just goes to show what happens when you get former peanut farmer, kind of just a man of God from the South that has these morals. Again, you could talk about his presidency here or there, but easily, in my opinion, the greatest post-presidency president, because of all the stuff he did. Because it kind of felt like, to your point about the Delta flights, of like, he just kind of is bewildered that he got this far. Like, he's like, oh my gosh, I'm so happy to be here. I'm so happy to be president. Good to see you. And it's all genuine. So yeah, point being, I think that, as a man, as a person, there's a lot to be admired. And honestly, a lot of the lesson there is, sometimes you don't compromise on that stuff. And I think that he very rarely did. And we could talk about his presidency. I'm not going to, being the guy who has the tweet. It's like, actually, Jimmy Carter wasn't a good, shut up. Like, like when,
cool.
Right. Like, come on, that's sick, dude. You don't like the thing that we're all sad about? Cool.
Awesome.
So yeah, that's my whole thing on Jimmy Carter. Again, didn't get to meet him, but just an awesome dude from everything I've heard.
I can't remember who tweeted this out. He's the first president that was born in a hospital. Isn't that crazy?
Golly, he also, I think, was born on. This is a Jimmy Carter fact. He was like born on in a different time zone, and they have since changed the time zone of that place. It was like,
that's cool.
Like one little part of Georgia that he was in was on like Central Time, and they like have since. So yeah, very like just a very quirky, unique president.
Yeah, they don't make him like Jimmy. They absolutely don't. Hope to one day experience a year 100 like Jimmy Carter did. That'd be incredible.
Yes. I do have one more. What's it called? Honorable mention. Hard to follow that, obviously. I'm just gonna spend a second to talk about geocaching.
Yeah, Will tweeted. Will sent me a message on. What was it? Yeah, you sent me a message on Instagram about this, about the K Klubnik thing. Maybe that went semi-viral. Did it go viral? I don't know. And I'm like, Will, I have no idea what this is. I've never seen this word geocaching in my entire life. You're like, you don't know what this? No, never seen it. Never heard it said. I'd ask you how to pronounce it. So this here, for those of us who do not know what this word is and why this came into a tweet related to Kate Klubnik, this is your official explanation of what geocaching is?
Geocaching. Okay. So, okay. Again, we've seen the SEC quarterbacks say things that have been confirmed that are more ridiculous than this, but there is the classic, we've all seen the tweet format of girl's hand with freshly done nails Snapchat, SEC quarterback's name, something super embarrassing.
Yep.
And it looked like this girl was trying to catch Cade Klubnik, and he's like, I want to see you RN, baby. Like, he's trying to hit her up. And he's like, oh, yeah, what are we going to do? Again, she's like, oh, I hit the pay dirt here. Probably go geocaching. What? Geocaching. So geocaching was a trend. I'm just going to talk off the cuff here about geocaching. It's already been a weird pod. I'm sure it might have predated this, but when it got into the lexicon for me, it was like a very Gen 1 or 2 internet thing where there was this list of GPS coordinates. And it was on some server, some document that was maintained by whatever geocaching society. And people would just hide stuff. And you could go consult the list. And like I was in Birmingham or Hoover, Alabama, and I would go geocaching locations in Hoover. Oh, there's one here by the Target. Me and my boys are going to go. This is very like Hawkins High, but with technology. And so literally it's just people leaving weird stuff for each other and then being like, here's some weird stuff, go find it. The fact that he pulled a geocaching Riz move, and like that's something that's like closer to your generation than mine. And I made the joke earlier, you were just too busy being cool, like applying to Indiana, playing football, doing normal stuff, whereas I, a little bit younger than you, was like, time to go geocaching. I did this one time with a girl, guys. Like it was not some things that
what did you find? What do people hide when they geocache? What is something that you can put that you have no sort of like, because you're not going to find out if somebody gets it unless you go back to it. So you don't even get the reward of seeing what this is like unless you're stalking this place out. I guess I'm just confused what you could possibly hide that you have no sort of emotional attachment to, that you also feel the need to put out there, hey, this thing is here and it was worth putting at a specific place instead of just on my doorstep for anybody to pick up and claim.
Yes, so every geocache has a logbook in it that you sign saying that you found the thing, and then you have to replace the thing with a thing. So you have to go out, bring your thing.
Take a penny, leave a penny situation?
Exactly, like a take a penny, leave a penny, or one of those little like good things. I don't know who maintains this. I don't know. Again, I don't know if there's an LLC or some weird history, but I think it's just some dudes like Craigslist style that are like, hey, not to be sexist, there's probably some women too, but this sounds like weird dude internet stuff. We're just hiding stuff. They're like, and the one in Alabama that I went to was like in a tree, and I had to like get up there with this girl watching me. I was pretty skinny, luckily, so it was like good. I'm gonna look athletic for a second. So
did you get anything from it? What was the reward? Was
the
it
reward
was
was signing the logbook. I think I brought, I probably brought like a little LSU piece of memorabilia because that was my vibe in high school in Alabama, just to be Mr. Nonconformist LSU guy. And so I don't even remember the item because the initial item is the only one listed, and then people just switch them out. So yeah, a dude talking about geocaching, that is Cade Club. I mean, I'm so in on him, dude. This the best 2 weeks this guy could have for me.
Geocaching. All right, learned something today.
And it might not be real. I don't care. I wanted to talk about geocaching today. I didn't want to cut you off about Jimmy. So there you go.
That's fair. Look, hey, we all need to expand our horizons. I don't know that I need to expand my horizons to geocaching, but nonetheless, maybe somebody listening to this will. Who knows? We'll see. All right. Plan is going to be recorded on Thursday. We will recap all things playoff related, all things SEC bowls that we have not gotten to yet. Oh, can we get one more update for the people who will not know the final score of this by the time that they're listening? Iowa currently leads 24-14, but Mizzou is on the 4-yard line. So, the Iowa 4. So, close game. Stay tuned.
Tune into the 6 o'clock news, and they'll keep you updated. Tomorrow's paper, buddy.
Oh, breaking news. 4-yard touchdown run.
Watch out.
24-21 game. You heard it here first.
They're back. I got to go throw that on.
Yeah, seriously. Don't spoil it for me. I don't want to know what happens. If you haven't, leave us a 5-star review. Subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can watch every episode of the Saturday Down South podcast. Follow us on Twitter at the SDS Pod, at SatDownSouth, at CJ Guerra, at Chris Hoy. Thanks, guys. Talk soon.